And we're rolling. Marianne Snow, thank you so much for being with us today.
I'm very glad to be here, Phil. Thanks for asking me.
Marianne is from Eskra Biotech, a company that, from the sound of it, sounds extremely interesting. And I have a lot of questions. Before we get started, quick introduction. I'm Phil. I'm a partner at Webisoft. We build custom software. This is our first podcast in 2026. So, congratulations, Marianne.
Glad to be number one.
Number one. And our heart, certainly. Do you want to start by a quick introduction, bio, who you are, and what you do?
Sure. Thanks, Phil. Hi, everybody. My name is Marianne Snow. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Eskura Biotech. So Eskura Biotech is a nanomedicine company. And what we do is we build synthetic molecules that can be used as very small containers to target medicines to particular treatment sites in the body. And we specialize in working on diseases related to cartilage, like osteoarthritis, like solid tumors, like triple negative breast cancer, and kidney disease, like PKD.
And so, does nanotech have a big advantage over other technologies to solve these particular issues?
I think, there's a nano means small, right?
Hmm.
We're little. But what I would say is we are a chemically modified, so a synthetic molecule. And I think the advantage that we have there is in the drug delivery world, because that's what we do. Think of us as the subway system or the public transport system for therapeutics to targeted areas. And because we can make chemical modifications, then the advantage that we have is we can really kind of develop a whole library of solutions that can be used for a whole particular disease set. And we think that the three areas that we're working on right now are just the tip of the iceberg in terms of things that we can help with in the future.
Can you talk about your career so far and how you got to this current position?
Sure. So I have the least linear career path that one could imagine. My background is actually on the business side. I was a senior executive in corporate international finance for a very long time and was really exposed to a lot of very interesting technology and different types of change projects and organizational development projects. And then I left corporate America in 2009 after the financial crisis
Hmm.
because they were defunding all the fun projects. And I started working with different clients to help them think about how to integrate new technologies that were coming onto the market, digital tools. Social media at that point was barely alive. I think Facebook had less than 1 million users at that point.
Yeah.
And social media, digital media, marketing tools, search engines, these things were just really kind of an emerging science.
Hmm.
And that also brought me to the life science world because life science companies, biotech companies, pharmaceutical companies very often have distributed teams of people who work all over the world and they have to figure out how to actually collaborate. And so I started working with biotech firms and life science firms, but I also started meeting scientists. And 20 years ago, I met my co founder, Dr. Yupeng Chen, who is a biomedical engineer at the University of Connecticut. And he was very fascinated with me because my background was very different than his background. And he had actually just come from China to study at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, where
Hmm.
I live. And we became friends, and we always said we had started companies with different people and had really terrible, terrible startup experiences. So we always said if we were going to start a life science company again, that we would actually do it together. And so 4.5 years ago, we launched Escura. And now, 4.5 years later, we are going strong. We've doubled in size, and we're exploring all sorts of unconventional ways to build medicine these days,
including in space.
including in space. Yes.
So how does that work exactly?
So I can tell you that Escuro wasn't originally intended to be a space manufacturing company. Escura actually started as a typical life science company. Two founders. I'm on the business side. My co-founder is our chief science officer, and we had an idea and a technology that we really believed in, that we felt could be brought to market to help patients. And yet, my co-founder was already doing some work with the U.S. Space Agency, NASA.
Mm-hmm.
And he happened to be at a space conference in Washington, D.C. on the day that I was filing the incorporation papers for Escura. And he called me and he said, I just found out about this new program that NASA is launching to support the development of commercial companies that could benefit from manufacturing in low Earth orbit or microgravity. And I think that we're a good fit for their program. Do you want to become a space company? And I sort of chuckled and I said, well, as a CEO, it's my job to find money. So will they give us money? And he said, yeah, we can actually do a proposal and submit a proposal. And I said, well, then there's no downside. So we we incorporated in November, submitted a proposal in December. We're asked to do an expanded proposal in December. In January, we submitted it. In March, we were funded. So suddenly, we were not only learning about building a life science company, but we were also learning about how to do it in very unconventional environments. So we were suddenly learning all about space language.
Mm-hmm. What was the biggest surprise there for you that you learned?
I think the thing that I learned first of all was just how humble the space community is and how small the space community is, but how curious and how interesting a group of people that they are. And
Mm.
if you're a good collaborator and you're open-minded and you go there willing to learn, as willing to as well as willing to share, that you can accomplish huge amounts of things in a very short period of time. And also, since people with life science and biotech companies are trying to solve very complicated problems, but so are folks who are trying to do stuff in space. So space folks are used to complicated problems, and you can solve things fairly rapidly when you've got a multidiscipline team all kind of working with a shared vision.
Mm. Can you describe a little bit how that works, right? What's the process like for you to collaborate with NASA or in this case, the ISS?
The ISS, the International Space Station, is a very unique structure. First of all, it's been around for 25 years,
There's
and
only one of those, right?
there's only one of them.
Very unique.
And it's extremely unique. And the other thing too is what really surprised us was the capabilities that the facility has. And I think it was because you've got folks who have been willing over the years to stretch the boundaries
Right.
of what's possible, in those environments. And so you might be saying to yourself, geez, can you take live cells to space? You can. Can you grow plants in space? You can. Can you bring animals to space? You can. We're a synthetic molecule, which means in some ways, because we're nano, we're little.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're synthetic, we can go up in a rocket ship at a normal temperature, just sort of average temperature. So we were very fortunate because over a 2-year period, we were able to actually send stuff to space 5 times and complete 5 missions in 24 months. And most people, it takes years and years. And one of the reasons we were able to do that was because, first of all, we had the backing of a lot of folks who really believed in us. And second of all, we took advantage, we learned the environment and we took advantage of the environment, and we really developed systems and processes that lent themselves to the environment, which made us a preferable payload when they were thinking about how to get the best science out of what they were putting into their cargo base.
Right. So timing was very good for you, basically.
Timing was really good. Timing was good in terms of NASA and the ISS's vision for beyond the ISS, what happens next.
Mm-hmm.
Commercial space stations that needed a clientele that would actually benefit from microgravity, and also right payload that actually benefits from being produced in microgravity. When we make stuff in space, it's about 40 to 50% better than when we make it on Earth.
Better by what metric?
We can actually have better loading capability, which means our containers are more uniform, they're more homogeneous. We can have greater predictability on our cargo loading when we put therapeutics inside. We can get bigger doses for those more uniform containers, and they're highly, highly stable.
And that's mostly because of what? There's higher precision in space with instruments, or?
No, it's actually because the lack of gravity
Mm-hmm.
means a lack of friction, a
Right.
lack of convection.
Mm.
And, our manufacturing process starts as particles in liquid. And on Earth, if you have particles in liquid, they tend to be influenced by gravity. They're going to go
Right.
to the bottom,
Yeah.
right? And if we put them in space, there's no sedimentation. So because they remain suspended, when they aggregate, when they come together to produce those containers, then the nice part about it is they are less impacted by those earth forces.
That's very cool. So is that something that that was more of a theory on your side prior to actually trying it in space, and then that basically confirmed your suspicions, or was that kind of known science for a while?
So we were building on years of work that was done by folks like Paul Reichert from Merck. Merck
Right.
is a major pharmaceutical
Yep.
company.
Mm-hmm.
Rob Garmis, who actually worked for Bristol Myers Squibb. Paul Reichert has actually been growing protein crystals in space for years and years. And while we're not a protein crystal, we start like he starts with particles in liquid. And his work, which
Right.
was building crystals, growing crystals in space, benefited from microgravity. While we're not crystals, we are similar in terms of our aggregation process. And so our theory was that we would experience the same effects that Paul and Rob were experiencing with their protein crystals.
Right. And was that confirmed?
It was,
All right. Good.
yeah, from the first flight.
And so then after that, it's just refining. And what's next? Like, what are you hoping to learn next from that environment?
So our next move is to a lot of the processes that we were doing with our proof of concept work were manual processes, right? There's a lot of human intervention. So we were actually working with the on-station astronauts to complete a lot of the production work. Our next step is to build automated systems so that we can now move to a semi-automated environment so that we can reduce the amount of human intervention until we get to the point where we can actually be fully automated. So we can actually set up a production environment on the ground, essentially do a plug and play, put it in a payload bay, bring it up into orbit, either on a commercial station
Hmm.
or a perpetual platform, actually execute the production and bring it right back down and never have to have human intervention.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Does AI play a part in all this?
We're actually using machine learning and AI for optimizing formulations for our molecules right at
Hmm.
this particular point in time. Because if you're going to put something in space, you're not going to be able to redo the experiment 100 times in 100 days, right?
Hmm. So limited window, you mean? Right.
Yeah, and we have relatively small data sets too. So we're working with folks who actually are helping us use machine learning and algorithmic models that will help us to take those data sets and really optimize formulations as quickly as possible,
Right.
with the understanding that we're trying to build kind of a base library of base molecules that can be used for different disease indications.
Hmm. And do you use AI in other aspects? Like describe a little bit how your company uses software in general.
Our use of technology is in the early stages because we're a startup.
Hmm.
So we're using technology to, on lots of different levels, right, Phil? We use it for data management.
Hmm.
How do we manage our data and keep it safe and also accessible? We're using it, we're a distributed team. So we use technology every day to do collaboration and teamwork. We use it as a mechanism to be able to we write a lot of proposals, we write a lot of white papers, those sorts of things. And it's certainly something that we use as an assistant to a lot of the work that we're doing to refine those things so that we can do more with less, right? Because we're a lean team, right? At this particular point in time, we're really talking about 4 full-time employees, plus we leverage my partner and his academic lab at
Right.
UConn.
Yeah.
We're talking like basically 8 people, 9 people work on our projects on our side. And then we have distributed teams of people that we work with elsewhere. So when we think about technology, in some ways, we use technology all over the place. We
Hmm.
couldn't live without it.
Obviously. Are you able to communicate with the space station, with the astronauts on the space station during, or is it more of a black box? It goes up and then comes down. How does it work?
No, actually, we tie into mission control and also the private space companies that we work with to help kind of facilitate the process. So when we're working with an astronaut crew, we're actually on OpenCom working sessions where we could be using Teams to do a video link. We also use technology to download data packets from the
Right.
International Space Station. So we get data from our stuff real time.
Hmm.
So we're in real time live communication with the astronauts while they're working on our product. They're asking us questions, we're asking them questions. So, and they actually work on the product with a camera on their shoulder.
Oh, very
So
cool.
we
Kind of
we
like a
can actually,
POV. Yeah.
yep, we can see them. And we've actually met many of them. We do all of their training materials. So we teach them about our technology. And because the International Space Station has astronauts from a lot of different places. We've also worked with private astronaut crews through companies like Axiom Space.
Hmm.
We went up on one of their private astronaut mission crews with Commander Peggy Whitson, Rihanna Bawana from Saudi Arabia. And so we've kept in contact with them. We've become friends with them. We collaborate with them. It's been a true blast.
Wow. What I remember from all this is that nowhere is safe from Microsoft Teams, not even space.
No,
You can't escape it.
yeah, no kidding. Yes, yeah. Enough said about that.
Everybody's got their preferences. Some people swear by Microsoft. We're not those people.
We have to be honestly, we have to be really agnostic about technology because in some ways we're an incredibly curious group, and we're looking for things that will create efficiencies, right? And will allow us an opportunity to be able to advance and accelerate things with a small group without giving away the fundamental bits, which is the integrity of the science, which
Mhm.
is making sure that we have a solid outcome that we could feel comfortable moving forward. Because remember, we're making medicines, and
Yeah, at the end of the
ultimately
day, right? You're
they're going
treating,
into
yeah,
people. So
yeah.
people, and we got to actually be able to convince someone. Think about this. I come to you, Phil, and I say, "Oh, you've got bad knees. I can help you. I made something in space. Would you like me to put it in your body?" And we want to be able to give people full confidence that we're doing that with a great deal of integrity, and also fully responsibly.
Well, so speaking of that, like, what stage are you with those treatments? Are you still in clinical trials? Are you pre-trials? Are you already available to certain patients? Where are you in the stage of the company?
So Esker is 4 years old, 4.5 years old. We're a preclinical company, which means we are working hard to gather the information that we need to be able to do clinical trials.
Mm-hmm.
The first product that we're hoping to get into clinical trials will be the osteoarthritis application. In order to do that, we have to do two things. One is we have to actually open a pathway for discussion with the FDA
Yeah.
in the United States, obviously, the Food and Drug Administration,
Mm-hmm.
to discuss the formation of a pathway to approval for space made medicines or space made medical products.
That's a distinction that you need to make, basically.
Well, at this point, since no medicines have ever been produced in space,
Mm-hmm.
the FDA, when we go through the approval process, part of what they're going to want to know is they're going to want to know, can you meet the FDA standards? And so we need to be able to convince the FDA that we can actually produce medicines within FDA regulated standards and meet the criteria for approval, thus paving the way for a regulatory pathway of approval for space made medicines.
Yeah, and obviously, outsider looking in, just trying to understand what would make it so that you wouldn't meet the standard just based on the fact that you manufacture in space. Is there obviously, I don't think they wrote the guidelines saying like this needs to be built on Earth, right? Like, what's different in space that could make it so that something would not fit or not make the cut on the.
So, one of the reasons that FDA would actually approve a medication is that you have sufficient information to be able to provide dosing requirements, right? Safe
Mm-hmm.
dosing requirements. Obviously, from a clinical perspective, that will be on the easy side, right? Whether
Mm-hmm.
you make it on the ground or you make it
Yeah,
on in
no
space,
difference.
there's going to be no difference.
Hmm.
However, part of this is also, can you actually establish a chain of custody for your product
Right.
from base ingredients right through to production, monitoring of the environment that ensures that you can have a consistent production environment that will produce very uniform product, regardless of if it's the first dose you make or the 5 millionth dose you make. There's got to be chain of custody that actually ensures safety, that ensures a lack of variability, that has uniformity, those sorts of things. And if your chain of custody is, okay, we're going to bring the raw materials together, we're going to do it in a production environment, we're going to put it in a rocket conveyance instead of a truck. We're going to put it in a rocket conveyance. We're going to bring it up into a microgravity environment and bring it back. Then, the FDA is going to say, how do you ensure those things? And so
Right.
we're working with every part of the supply chain to answer that question.
So it's kind of uncharted territory a little bit.
Sure.
But you're going to see more and more of that in the future, right? Or
Yes,
you
you will.
should. Yeah.
You will, because we're not the only people doing this.
No, and it seems like there's a lot of advantages. And like you said, uh, space stations in general are probably moving towards commercial applications and commercial companies running things. How far are we, in your opinion? Because I know there's been talks about the ISS being decommissioned. Obviously there's going to be a replacement. How far are we from a commercial operation in space, in your opinion?
The ISS is publicly announced that they'll be decommissioning in 2030, which means they've actually given SpaceX a contract to deorbit the
Hmm.
space station and bring it down in the Pacific Ocean. God help us. That's the plan at the moment.
Right.
Over the course of the next 4 years, there are a series of companies that are working very hard to put the first commercial space station up into orbit in order to be able to start establishing that ecosystem. And there's a couple of key players. The two big ones right now are Axiom Space, who has been flying private astronaut missions. They're actually working on a module that is set to go up by 2028. But there's a newcomer on the scene named Vast Space, a U.S. company based in California. Axiom is U.S. based in out of Houston, but Vast is out of California, and they're saying that they're going to put a module up into space by the end of 2026. And we are aiming to get on their first payload.
Very
So right at
nice.
this point, we are hoping and in negotiations to get on their first ride.
All right, fingers crossed. So
Fingers
another bit of a
crossed.
space race going on between California and Texas.
Oh, there's a total space race. There's also Blue Origin
Yeah.
and Sierra Space have been working on things called Orbital Reef. There are additional companies. There's a company out of New Hampshire called Rogue Space that's looking to put a perpetual platform up that we're actually also partnering with, because they would have commercial capabilities as well. So we're looking at all sorts of opportunities. And we work with Axiom, we work with Vast, we work with Rogue. So we are positioning ourselves with all the players so that we can test out all those capabilities.
Very cool. So for you, it's just good news, basically, to have a little bit of a competition there because it's just more opportunities and more options at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Um, final question for you, Marianne. What are you most excited about for the future? Like, what's one innovation that you see that's going to directly affect your business that you're really excited to see come to light?
So, I think technology is a real game changer, right? I think that people are applying AI in machine learning and algorithmic modeling computational methodologies to take out many of the former steps that happen in the timeline to building medicines. And that actually is one of the reasons that medicines cost a lot because they take a long, long time to make,
Yeah.
right? And there's a lot of dollars involved and there's a lot of time involved.
Hmm.
And so if you can take, if you can condense that timeline, that means that you can have the potential to be able to bring something to market on a faster timeline, then that's a much better end result for patients at the end of the process.
Yeah.
And I would find that really encouraging. And the other thing that I find really encouraging is old conventions for how medicines, I think that, COVID, for all of its downsides, proved that you could bring people together in collaborative, new and interesting collaborative ways to accelerate the development of products. And I think what COVID absolutely did was to open up the possibility for different types of multidiscipline collaborations that I think are going to benefit drug discovery in the future.
Right. Yeah. Well, so when humanity's faced with a challenge and they kind of bound together and figure it out quicker. Yeah. I hope that's what's going to happen with AI and when eventually it gets to general intelligence or super intelligence or whatever, that we'll kind of figure it out fast. And the other big one is climate change, of course. So we'll
Yeah,
see.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
We'll
yeah.
see. Well, Marianne, thank you so much for taking the time today. This was very insightful and for me, a very exciting topic to discuss.
Well, thanks a lot, Phil. I really appreciate it. And obviously, it's a topic near and dear to my heart. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and your audience about some of the exciting things that are happening in space today.
Yeah, and I'll keep checking out the progress, see if you're on that next mission for sure.
Sounds great.